Welcome to America's Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for intel, success strategies, and forecasts on commercial real estate. And today we have a special show for you. This segment is brought to you by Commercial Agent Success Strategies for online video for commercial agents. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com. Today we're going to talk about office tenant strategies. And it's such an important thing to talk about today because a lot of companies are concerned about their space, about wellness, about rent per square foot, the people per square foot. It seems like the office market is changing pretty rapidly in a lot of markets. Please welcome my first guest. I have an expert for you, Richard Rhodes. He's managing principal with Cresa, and he's joining us on the phone. Rich, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Michael. Nice to be here.
Rich, you handle a lot of tenants, a lot of large tenants. You're based there in D.C. where your Cresa headquarters is. So tell me, what are some of the themes or the trends you're hearing from tenants today? What are some of their major concerns?
Yeah. So I think let's talk trends. And the big thing is live, work, play, right? So people want to live and work and play within walking distance of one another. So you've seen a lot of development pop up around public transportation in the Washington area. That would be the metro stations. So the density has changed. Buildings are going up higher than they ever were before. The zoning has changed to accommodate this. So there is a trend to get to that center. And if I owned an office park, I would be concerned as to what's happening there because those office parks are typically more spread out and not on these main lines, and there aren't a ton of amenities in those parks. So that is definitely a development trend that's seeing an uptick in leasing, which then goes to trend number two, which is a flight to quality because new product is going to be more expensive, but people are willing to pay for it if they can get the other things I mentioned. So I think that's it. Those are two sort of an A and B, but a connected trend there that we're seeing in a big way in Washington.
Yeah, that's interesting, Rich. So you're still seeing a flight to quality even in these transit-oriented developments and where these offices where they can live, work, and play. I imagine you're seeing the highest rents as well in these spaces, and that's where everybody wants to be.
It's amazing. I mean, in some of these submarkets, the rents are as much as $20 a foot higher, and tenants are opting to go there. I do think there is some offset in efficiencies, right? These new buildings that are coming up are much more column-free. They're more rectangular, less funky shapes, so people are laying out better. They're also modulating from heavy office environments to more what I'll call mixed use, workstation office combinations or all workstations. So if the rent's going up 30%, maybe they're saving 10% in efficiency or so. So there is some offset there of cost.
Yeah, I mean that's the big point, right? It's the productivity, it's the profit. Are you recruiting? Are you retention? How's your productivity? And Rich, what about if they are paying that much more rent? There's still this flight for quality. What are you seeing for trends on square footage per employee? I mean, there seems to have been this push to get more people in less space. What are you seeing today?
Yeah, and I would say to some extent, some companies, you've heard from Yahoo, you've heard from IBM, where they say that backfired, where they either hoteled and sent people home to work or they stuffed a ton of people into space at 120 square feet per person, where the old world was 220 square feet per person. I think you're seeing the market back off of that a little bit. They like the synergies of having everybody together. It's difficult to administer hoteling when you have more than one person using the same desk on different days. So I think that people are getting a little more space, a little more huddle room, a little more privacy. I think we're finding a hybrid between where we were 10 years ago and where we were 2 years ago. So, yes, the efficiency is better. The square foot per employee, to answer your question, On average, around 200 square feet is probably a fair number. You see people more efficient and less efficient, depending on the industry group.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you think about years past when you see this huge reduction in square footage per employee, the employment market was struggling, right? And so now we have low unemployment. And so it seems like, hey, if I'm an employee and I have plenty of options to get employed, then don't put me on a bench elbow to elbow, right?
You're absolutely right. I've seen this cycle more than once. When the economy is bad, they look to save money at real estate, which is typically their number 2 line item behind salaries. When it's good and they can afford it, they're leasing more office space, and we are definitely trending upward in that respect. And I think that's what's driving a lot of this new development, because much of it is speculative. You know, it's not all pre-committed space. It's developers taking a risk that, yeah, people do want to be live, work, play. They do want to pay a little bit more to be in a better quality building. They want to recruit better, to your point.
Right, and we're talking with Rich Rhodes. He's a managing principal with Cresa, and he helps companies with their space needs. So, Rich, what would you say would be the top 3 mistakes that tenants should avoid when it comes to their office space use, renewals, and new space?
Yeah. Number 1 is always waiting too long to start the process.
Yeah.
People always underestimate the time it takes. Whatever you think it is, just assume it's twice as long.
Right.
It just, but by the time, let's say from the time if you're a 10,000-foot tenant, by the time you sign a lease and you start your drawings and you get your permits and you build your space, that could be 5, 6, 7 months. The lease these days are taking 2 to 3 months by themselves, so now we're almost at a year. And then we need at least 6 months to do what we do really well. And that's for 10,000 feet. As the requirement gets bigger, you need more time. So I think that is mistake number 1. You're better to engage a real estate advisor ahead of when you think you might need one, because you're going to end up eating the time.
Excellent tip, and I think that should be number 1. How about number 2?
Number 2 would be the not negotiating enough flexibility in your lease. Tenants don't realize that they have the leverage to negotiate things like termination options, options to expand, even options to contract. You know, one of the rising tenant markets, and this is related to the Trump presidency, is the defense contracting market, which has really been asleep for a dozen years. It's now coming back, and they're all contract-driven. So we're often negotiating contraction rights related to specific contracts, where we'll write the contract number into the lease, and if they lose it, we can give up a commensurate amount of space. So the second mistake is not negotiating enough flexibility in what are typically long-term leases. Excuse me.
Yeah, and while you're on number 2, and I think it's that's very important to understand flexibility and try to negotiate that. And also, I'm sure we would agree with this, it's also thinking about all the types of flexibility and lease clauses that you might want to ask for, and prioritize those. See what's most important to you, so you know going in, right?
That's right. That's right. The hardest thing in leasing is you're moving into a building. You need the landlord's money to build out. Once again, perhaps you're paying a higher rent than you're used to, so you need the rental abatement to bring the effective rate down. Mm-hmm. In order to get these things, you have to sign 10, 11, 12, even a 15-year lease. So what you don't want to lose is flexibility. So to me, the very first thing I'm negotiating is the right to get out of that lease at some point, even if it comes with a penalty, because there's a myriad of reasons why you might have to do that. And if you don't have that, then you're subject to the sublease market, which, you know, in my 35 years of doing business, I think I can think of 2 of those years where you might have broken even on a sublease.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a shortfall.
Well, and the quick answer, number 3.
Number 3, look, I represent tenants. There is no number 3. Tenants don't make mistakes. Those are the only 2 mistakes they make.
Number 3 is there are no mistakes.
Number 3 is find a good tenant broker
okay.
to help you with your problems.
Well, you know, that's a good point. And, you know, I think you look at the smart tenant, so you look at, you know, you read in the paper that a law firm leased space, and then you read who represented them, and you think of that law firm, they've got a big commercial real estate department. They understand leases. They understand real estate. They get good tenant reps like you and your firm and us and our firm. Rich, good information as usual. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, and stay tuned. We're going to have more on office tenant strategies because there is a lot more to cover. We ran out of time with Rich, but there's things like wellness. There's things to help you negotiate better transactions. So stay with us. I'm Michael Bull. This is America's Commercial Real Estate Show.